and feminist resistance, and how those two combine. And so get comfy. We have stellar musical performances coming. We're going to start with Ivy Alexander, who is an East African guitarist and is going to lead us in a performance, and will be then joined by Lisa Adore Noah.
Well, it keeps going away. I don't know if it's what's the setting on you guys' end, but
or the connection gets loosened.
Yeah, we're not hearing it.
Victoria, is Victoria there?
I'm here, Sherry.
Yeah, so the mic is actually as close as possible to her.
I don't know. It's going to be, you'll see like Zoom optimized audio, and then below there's original sound for musicians. You should click that.
So that was an original piece called Tidal. Yeah, I shortened it a bit because it usually has other elements, but yeah, that's me. So next up, I'm going to do a couple of songs with Lisa. Hi. Said I remember when we used to sit in the government yard, trench town, all observing the hill, the grace, yeah, mingling with the good people we meet, yeah, yeah. Good friends we have, good friends we are, along the way, in this great future. You can't forget your past. So dry your tears, I say. You know what to sing to me, guys? No, cry. Oh, no, cry. Please, darling, don't shed no tears. Oh, no, cry. Yeah, yeah. Said I when we used to sit in the government yard in Trench Town. And then Georgie would make the firelight. I say, a log of wood burning through the night. Yeah, yeah. And we of which I'll share with you. My feet as my only carriage. So I've gotta push through. I gotta push through. And no, don't you, oh, so say everything's gonna be alright. 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 No. Right. show. Yeah. Oh, no. Right. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yatemuyabon, sofela konembini, gege baskon, ningashanti. Yatemuyabon, sofela konembini, gege baskon, ningashanti. Kutena, ini udangele. Gonna kele amatema oge wabegagimi awazina abanta baifu idwekle bayamuza baklimo sama kametlweni Yatemuyabon, sofela konempini, gege baskon, lingashon, yate, sofela, gege baskon, shon, utenina, ini udangere, konakere, amatema ako, wonke wabekagimi, awazina amanta my food did wetle my anansa baglim sabat kemetliweni yatemuyaba sobela empini gege baskon linga shumpi yatemuyaba sobi baskon shumpi yabo Pelakupi, gege baskona, linga shon envidia, temuya, yo pelakupi, gege baskona, linga shon. That song is called Mpini. It's by a lady called Kelly Kumalo, and she was just singing about how the word Mpini means war. So in life we'll fight many battles, but how important it is for you to overcome. There's always victory on the other side. So it's kind of like, I guess, not just a war cry, but it was like a way for her to say, I'm championing for myself and declaring that there's something on the other side that's greater for me in the midst of my storm, you know? And the next
Before
one
we
is- Yes.
before we get going to the next one, if I can please
Oh. There is a woman in Somalia scraping for pearls by the roadside. There's a force stronger than nature, keeps a will. That is how she lives her life. She is dying to survive. I don't know what she's made of, but I would like to be that brave. She cries to the heavens above. There is a storm. She lives a life she didn't choose, and it hurts like brand new shoes. Yes, it hurts like brand new shoes. Oh, amiana, amiamaka, detele, amiana, inamaka, detele, amiana, inamaka, detele, ayana, inamaka, detele. There is a woman in Rwanda. The sun shows her no mercy. The same sky lay under. It burns her to the bone. It's afternoon shadows. It's gonna take her to get home. Each grave carefully wrapped up. These pearls for a little girl. I She cries to the heavens above. There's a storm. She didn't choose, and it hurts like brand new shoes. Yes, it hurts like brand new shoes. Yes, it hurts like brand new shoes. Just like brand new shoes. Oh, mi alaina maka, detele, oh, ami alaina maka, detele, ami alaina maka, detele, ami alaina maka. She cries out. Oh, she cries out. She, yeah, she cries out. She cries to the heavens. There's the star. She lives a life she didn't choose, and it hurts like brand new. Detele, amiana ina maka, detele, amiga, detele.
My answer to you. I don't know if I place it here. Or can I hold it?
Sarah, you can place it on the floor in between the two of them.
Okay.
It picks up sound from both. Yeah, there you go. Let's give this a try.
Oh, excellent. What a treat. Can we give a round of applause? I'm going to ask, we're now transitioning to the conversation. And so I'm going to ask you get off your lovely stools and move to the chairs. And I'm going to invite Lydia to also join us. We've just heard from Ivy Alexander, one of East Africa's finest guitarists. Ivy has for some time now been challenging ignorance and changing narratives regarding women in the music industry through her mastery of the instrument. And then we heard from Lisa Odwor-Noah, a Berklee College of Music alumnus. Lisa aims to use music to express stories of hope and love and to be a healer and restorer in the world. And we are now going to invite also Lydia Matata, whose films include Sungura that we tried and wanted to screen but cannot. But a perk is you can ask our AVA team for the password and we'll be able to share a link to Sungura if you would like to screen it. And Lydia has recently won the Nairobi Film Festival Writers' Prize for her feature film script, Pepakali. So multiply talented. Sungura is doing the rounds in film festivals, receiving a lot of awards. You definitely want that password. And so definitely ask the AWA team for it. Thank you so much for making time to be in conversation with us. And so just at opening, Lydia, because we were not able to screen Sungura, maybe just telling the world a bit more about the film, the plot, just to give us a glimpse.
Okay, Sungura is a film, it's a very, I call it a colorful, sensual, female-centric, Afrocentric film. So the plot, it's about a woman with a disability who wants to buy a vibrator from what we call a senga, or a traditional sexologist, at a friend's bridal shower. But then to buy the vibrator, she either has to buy it in secret or confront the other women in the room who believe that because she's a wheelchair user, she is non-sexual and therefore doesn't need a vibrator in the first place. So Sungura means rabbit. It's the rabbit vibrator, basically, in Kiswahili. Yeah.
And why did you think that was a story that needed to be told?
So at the time, I wanted to buy a vibrator. And I remember, I felt such shame. And I told like a group of women, like on a WhatsApp group, a group of women friends, whether I'm thinking of, there are vibrators on Jumia and this place, I'm thinking of ordering one. However, the thing was, but Lydia, you're so pretty, you can find someone. And that was not the point. I was just, I had never had an orgasm with somebody, I was curious about this thing. I just wanted to explore it. And I think it was also the larger thing of for women, if their sexuality is just, especially for us in our community being so patriarchal, just for pleasure is bad when women talk about it in that sense. And I think I just had a thought of if I was talking about sex with a partner and that kind of thing, it would have been more acceptable. And when I started thinking about it, just maybe my mind started to expand to other groups within our community who find where it becomes more and more and more and more restrictive when they are in other identities. And at that time, my friend, I have a friend who is, she's a woman with a disability. She leads an organization called WARD. And she talks about a lot about sexual reproductive health and rights for women with disabilities. And she just posted, I'm a woman like you with sexual feelings and sexual pleasure. And suddenly this idea came up of someone who has those two identities. They are a Kenyan woman who is only supposed to have sex to have babies. But then they are also a person with a disability where they are looked at as completely non-sexual human beings in different aspects. And started to create the script. And then I think draft 3, I reached out to my friend Frida and all the women in my life who have a disability and shared the script with them. And knowing that I may have created this thing, but I am not also part of the disability community and needed to have them in that space from the very beginning, from development. And we'll just have coffees in this place called City Star in town, free advertising. And they'll tell me some of those stories were hilarious, but then, but most of them were just made me angry about how misconceptions about their disability acts as a barrier when they're trying to exercise their sexual agency or sexual reproductive health rights. Like I remember one friend of mine, said there was a time when a doctor or the guys at the VCT center refused to give her HIV test because she's a person who has a visible disability. And he said, like, no, there's nothing that you can be doing in your life to expose you to HIV. And when we were having that conversation, a man walked to our table I was with my producer for the film, Ivy Kiru, and the guy started to tell her about how he was an expert on disability and how she should navigate her life. It was very surreal. And then she had to say, excuse me, we're having a private conversation. Kindly go sit down. And then also so it was just lovely, the development of the film and also the casting. The main character she's a first-time actor, but super talented. And she has a disability. She was in the first screening for this film by Awid. She was part of the panel. Her name is Florence Wamboinjeri, and she's like first of all, she was like amazing during the audition, and then also like even for herself, like one of the stories that she tells is she has like a beautiful 7-year-old daughter, and a lot of people don't believe her child. Like somebody had to have taken advantage of her to have this child, and that's drawing from that experience to make it like an amazing film. And then also my biggest thing as a filmmaker is also how we are portrayed as Africans. So when we use Afro bubblegum movement, I am a believer that just because even if you're doing stories on heavy social issues about this continent, they do not have to be drab and joyless with that saturated blue-green color. Okay, that is not our lives. This is a very colorful space. You can see how everyone is dressed, and that is what I wanted for this film. I wanted it to scream colored, for it to be fun, for people to laugh, even if they're understanding this huge issue. And I think like if you had a chance to watch Rafiki before it was banned, the thing that did is it made that film a coming of age film about two queer women. It wasn't a victim film. And that's the same thing that I wanted for this. It was just a fun film about a woman who wants to buy a vibrator and she's being frustrated by idiots in the room. Yeah, that's basically it. Yeah.
And in doing so, when telling Kamunto's story, it's expanding humanity and therefore using stories as a way to not just nourish, but also showcase experiences that are often rendered invisible, and the importance of that. And I'd love to hear, and would love to just get your thoughts on how you use art and your form, whether it's guitar, songwriting, music. Why do you think it's important to use art as storytelling, as having a message?
I feel like some people understand things better in music, and a lot of messages that might not come so easily worded when I'm speaking to you. You might hear melody and it might relate to you better. Like, ironically, I know some people who might not even understand certain languages or might not even speak English, but when they hear a tune, or even like, I think in Kisumu, there's some pilot programs where guys teach through songs that guys know. So I think art sometimes is the bed for understanding people when it feels like language is doing this, you know, or it's too complicated to, and when you break it down simply to something that is like a song like Twinkle, look at Twinkle Twinkle, you know, I'm teaching kids about the stars, even though they'll be like, they have no frame of reference of it's a big ball of gas up there in the universe, you know? So it's just simple, like it sparkles and I'm showing you with your fingers, you know, and you remember the tune, but you don't realize you've learned about stars, you know? So at least that's for me.
I think I'd say the same thing. It just sonically explains what cannot be logically expressed.
Yeah.
So like personally, because I'm a guitar player, I don't have lyrics to my music, but there are songs that I write and you can feel the somber emotion mood. So I think it does express what we're feeling. You can't logically express it, but you're in tune with it. So I'd say that's an important thing about that to me. Yeah.
So like we're living in heavy, complicated times. How do you as creatives, world makers, culture shifters, where do you draw your inspiration from? How do you find the ways to keep going?
I think I'd say we're each unique and no one can ever be us. So I think I draw my inspiration from the fact that I'm unique and no one can ever be me. And so what I'm expressing is just going to be unique. Yeah. So, and besides that, I guess personally, my religion, I draw inspiration from my religion. I'm a Christian, so a lot of my music is God inspired. So I'd say that keeps me going.
Yeah. Okay, for me as a filmmaker, it's complicated.
We love complicated.
I think I just find at times that there is a person, there is an experience, there is an issue that has moved me, and I will stay stuck in that. And I think film is it's a bit complicated because it's quite expensive. The development takes long. The looking for funding can kill you. And you stay in that thing and you remember there's this thing and it was so moving. There was this thing that you experienced and it needs to be expressed. Despite all the rejection letters, despite the shortlisting for the fund, despite which camera guy decided to quit the day before, it still needs to happen. Yeah.
I think I agree with Ivy about the uniqueness and also for me sharing the same religion and frame of perspective, I guess. And then at the same time, I think at the end of the day, every human being desires connection. So for me, a lot of the pieces I draw are in the stories I hear and the other songs I listen to. Like, I think I'd recommend everyone not just to listen to songs with lyrics, but listen to instrumentals because, like, for instance, I find when I'm not just cleaning, but sometimes when I really want to sleep well or when I want to just sit and think, I listen to instrumental music and that spurs something else. But on top of that, I think like there's so many stories in life, you know, I could be sitting in an Uber and then the Uber driver is like, hey, Uliona, did you see the news today? And then you have a whole other story, like, and write a whole song based off of the fact that I was sitting in the Uber with Joro, you know, and he told me his frame, the way he looks at life is not going to be the way I look at life. The way Sanyu looks at life is not going to be the way I look at life. And outside of my own story, or just having the different perspectives, like we're all looking at this big elephant and asking someone else, what side do you see? it's very different from mine or it's similar to mine, but I like that we're still all seeing the elephant, you know. So yeah.
I see you nodding and like thoughts are percolating. And I just want to know what those thoughts are. Because I'm like, yeah, we're just gathered around having a conversation. Like,
I feel like it's I don't know, there is a similarity. I'm agree in terms of, yeah, that is also a process, like for filmmakers, something happens and it stays with you and it's part of the storytelling and it comes from anywhere, any little thing. Yeah.
what have been some interesting projects or collaborations, however you want to see it, that where you've got to infuse your politics with your art form? And I know there are many, but pick a couple.
We got to do a campaign with Ivy actually in December, alongside UN Women, in a campaign against gender-based violence. That was in December. Yeah, and actually last year on Women's Day, we also had another campaign, but that was more based on climate. So it's very interesting now trying to relate music to climate change. But then it's like, how? You know? But then you don't realize there are a lot of composers also who are inspired by nature as well. And so if your frame of reference is like being depleted, it's like, so how am I gonna be inspired? Or even like I had a songwriting teacher who would tell us, go for a walk, you'll find song seeds. Like, who knew about something called song seeds? Like, we make reference to nature even in the things that help us compose the things that we're doing, you know. So I think those two at least I can speak about. Ideal each other wants to
Same.
So of course Sungura is one, just being a sex positive human being. But the other, so I'm a fiction documentary filmmaker. So right now I am in the edit of a film called Mother to Mother. So I filmed with a group of all women frontline health workers who live and work in an informal settlement called Madare. And their work is basically to ensure that the women within their community are able to access healthcare across HIV prevention and care, early childhood development, and the care of children with disabilities as well. And I have another film called Utapata Mwingine, which means you will get another one. Yes, it's a short documentary where I follow an amazing young Kenyan woman called Vivian Gaiko. Vivian supports parents who are struggling through a pregnancy or infant child loss. In Kenya, there's very little mental health support, including for parents who have suffered the loss of a child. And one of the things that happens is we also have this misconception at times that you can get over the death of a child or the loss of a pregnancy by simply having another child to replace the one that has died. So hence that you will get, don't worry, you'll get another one, or usijali utapata mwingine. Yeah, I think, yeah, that's I have yeah, okay, there's one a long time ago. So I am very I'm very conflicted when it comes to my religious beliefs. And so I have a film called Millet that kind of explores that confusion. It's like my first fiction film from 1,001 years ago. Yeah.
Say more about the
okay. So
I mean, you can't just leave us there and leave us hanging.
I think okay. So Millet, it's a very silly film. It's about a girl called Kaje who is forced to go on Akesha. What is Akesha in English? Help me.
Overnight prayer service.
Yes, overnight prayer service with her mother to a very obscure church. And when she arrives at the church, she discovers that her mother and the other congregants are starving because they are only allowed one plate of millet per day in their entire lives, whether they are in the church or at home. But then she discovers that the pastor who made the rule is secretly eating real food. So she has to prove to her mother that this guy is trying to kill you for your wealth and your land. But of course, she's a child, and then and this is also a punishment for fighting. So she's a bad child. So her mother does not believe her. And I think when it comes to religion, because I was raised Christian, and there will be days I will turn to God, then there will be days a pastor will say something about women, and I am angry, and I am like, what? And it's just that thing of, I think, embracing feminism, and then this thing that seems very patriarchal, and it's a very difficult thing for me.
Are there any complexities, Ivy and Lisa, that you sit with in your art?
I think sometimes one of the things we were talking about actually even last year was how it's not even in our writing. When you see, people wouldn't believe that it's you who did the music or you who wrote the song, or if you're the engineer, someone will walk up to someone else. Like it actually happened today at the sound check, and he went and said, "Are you the one playing the keys?" And in my head I was like, I can't believe it. I produced the whole track and everyone is still not going to believe that I did it. And it's annoying sometimes because it's like, I know it's easier to think that like, yeah, the MD is the guy playing the keys. But I was like, like even after you say, I've produced it, it's my first produced, it's great. Someone will be like, so what did you play? And you're like, yeah, I played this chord, or even things like, someone will go to like, they'll come to you on stage and they'll be like, okay, who's the lead guitarist?
I've actually had such an experience,
Yeah.
I pulled up to a rehearsal and I'm setting up, and the artist, and unfortunately it was a lady. She looked at the music director and was like, so where's the guitarist? And I'm there setting up my gear. So I was like, hi. So I think, the gender thing is mainly the one of the complexities we face in the industry, and to be, I'd probably not just be called a musician, but get out of the tag of female musician, just to be known as just a musician, like as anyone.
Or even in like sometimes settings where, for instance, like I'm the only female in a band full of men, but I'm the one who's the MD. So, and you're just there watching them, and you're like, this is a lot of testosterone in the room. But at the same time, you can see how their opinions are so strong. But then when you voice something, some of them might not respond to you as like, okay, yeah, you should actually listen to what she's saying. And it's like, why should I have to say it over and over when someone else, one of you says it, you do it immediately, play this, blah, blah, blah. And so you're kind of like, I shouldn't feel like I have to prove myself, or because now you believe me when I've done so how many gigs, like 10 or 15 gigs, now I'll be called the music director, rather than actually they do the work, every time there's a new song, every time you put out a video, every time you put out a new film, like it's like, why should I have to have numerous to prove that I am capable, some of them.
How's that? And I know we're gonna tap into New York because there's a performance from the New York portal coming, and I wanted to check whether now is a good time to break, and then we'll come back and have the performance for New York and continue this conversation with folks in New York. So this is the plan. See you in 10. We are taking a break.
Thank you.
Snacks.
Dinner.
I know, just.
And then we can even right.
I'll put it in the house.
that you're going to guide us through. We're looking forward to it. We can't hear you.
There we go. Now we can.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Saloni. Nice to see you. Nice to see all of you. So full disclosure, this is less performance, more reading. I think we saw some really beautiful performance earlier. So I'll at least locate what I'm doing there. But I wanted to spend a little time today reading from a solidarity statement that my organization, the Asian American Feminist Collective, put together with a group we kind of call our sister group called Black Women Radicals, that's led by Jamie Swift. We had begun having conversations with each other in 2020 after Jamie reached out to us, basically thinking about anti-Asian violence in New York City, kind of in the first weeks of COVID. And what we had found in the US anyway is that there was this very strange but predictable discrepancy that was happening. There was a lot of violence directed towards Asian people, Asian presenting people walking in the streets, but the COVID deaths were overwhelmingly among Black and Hispanic New Yorkers. So there was this kind of double violence that was happening that was really asymmetrical. And we were all in our homes and kind of unable to have a conversation about how that might happen, how those things are produced, and how as feminists we actually can show up for one another and think about solidarity across difference, which has sometimes dropped out of at least our local feminist conversation. It's something that we don't always know how to practice, or like it's a muscle that you actually have to work, is something we came to. So we had a series of conversations with Jamie, and then we actually began editing a writing series, a creative writing series with the Asian American Writers Workshop. So as part of that, we kind of wrote a solidarity statement, and I'll read a briefly excerpted one just so I'm not talking at you, but we also have some questions that I'd love to pose to the group. They're kind of guided questions, and there may be two themes here. One is, what does solidarity like look and feel like, and when does it feel, you know, we initially asked, what does it smell like, what does it taste like, what is the physical experience of being in solidarity with people who are different from you? When does that feel painful or difficult? And if anyone would like to start thinking now about an experience of that kind of solidarity that has felt challenging, but nonetheless fruitful, I welcome it. And then finally, how we actually have pleasure. And I think an answer we keep coming to, we've had this conversation in a few different arenas, and something that keeps coming up is that without real relationships with each other, it's very difficult to actually practice solidarity that is authentic instead of just performative. And so how we actually are with each other, what it means like to prioritize pleasure. And we've been really kind of taking things slow. We were just discussing an American penchant towards perpetual busyness, which we are like trying to contest all the time. But we are working on a zine right now, which is all about pleasure. It's called The Thirsty Zine. And it is, to kind of an earlier point, you know, we so often talk about at least Asian American sexuality in these really fraught terms. You know, we had a spa shooting here, there's violence, there's domestic violence, but there's also pleasure that we at least would like to foreground in our inside conversations, at least. Through how do you hold space for those two things, danger, violence, safety, but also really like a full-throated pursuit of pleasure, and how those things work together. So I'm opening all of those up after I do my little reading for us to kind of collectively talk on. I have more specific questions, but great. All right, I'm gonna get started.
Yay.
I'm not even sure where the camera is, by the way, so I'm not sure if I'm looking at you. Okay, all right. Okay, great. Okay, so when Jamie first reached out to us, she sent this message. I believe that we need each other and need to learn from one another now more than ever. The simple act of reaching out with an invitation to engage in dialogue allowed us to come together and actually begin building a relationship. We hosted our first conversation about how COVID-19 was sparking anti-Asian racism and at the same time disproportionately impacting Black communities. It was an opportunity for all of us to put the feminist praxis of solidarity to work and reflect on our interconnected path towards liberation. Ruth Wilson Gilmore, a prison abolitionist and Black feminist theorist, talks about crisis as an instability that can bring about new radical change through developing new relationships and alignments towards political struggle. This was our opportunity to engage in that. We aren't the first ones to arrive here. It is imperative that we continue to construct a radical imaginary, a feminist worldview, while noting that we are but an iteration of feminists with a long transnational tradition in feminist movement building. We pay homage to radical Black and Asian American feminists before us, who throughout history have fought alongside one another for collective liberation. People like Audre Lorde, Grace Lee Boggs, Fran Beal, Gwen Patton, Yuri Kochiyama, Loretta Ross, Pat Sumi, Miriam Ching, Yoon Louis, and countless others. These were organizers and movement builders who formed revolutionary coalitions and solidarities and were deeply involved in community-based struggles for welfare rights, labor protections, and civil rights in service of liberation. Within Black feminist political memory, we can look to several examples of radical Black women in the African diaspora who have worked to build this frame of reference, including Trinidad and Tobago-born communist and journalist Claudia Jones, who is the founder of the newspaper West Indian Gazette and the Afro-Caribbean News, Black British radical activists Olive Morris and Stella Dadsey, who were both founding members of the Organization for Women of Asian and African Descent, Afro-Asian activist and founding member of the Combahee River Collective, Dr. Margot Okazawa-Ray, who I believe you are all familiar with as well, and Denise Oliver Velez, activist and leader of the Young Lords Party and Black Panther Party. We recognize that our histories are intrinsically tied together. Looking back to histories of Black and Asian American feminist solidarities and movement work can help us think about how our struggles towards liberation are necessarily connected and how we can create change together, especially in our longest standing fights against carceral systems of empire, war, and capitalism. We think about the calls made by the Combahee River Collective and the Third World Women's Alliance to confront and examine patriarchy within our own movements and cultures, centered around understandings of solidarity by actually engaging difference. For example, the Third World Women's Alliance, which emerged out of the Black Women's Liberation Committee, drew upon different experiences of gendered exploitation and colonialism to show how building feminist solidarity was a vital part of a revolutionary internationalist movement, signaling that the struggle against imperialism, racism, and patriarchy was a shared one. These legacies offer us a reflection on how we build collective politics around unequal differences. Cross-racial organizing is radical and a threat to the state. During the civil rights movement, state-sanctioned programs like the FBI's COINTELPRO in the 1960s made concerted efforts to disband groups from building alliances, especially across racial lines, by raising suspicions and pitting our organizations against each other. As we situate this history in the present, we have to reckon with the decades that have since passed, decades that have led to shifting politics around class, race, and a more nuanced vision of how imperialism can be perpetuated by countries that were once in the Third World Alliance. Those of us in the present must engage with the imbalances of prestige, power, wealth, authority, and value, and trace the trajectories of that imbalance carefully. But the legacy of feminist solidarity is alive and well today, in the intertwining movements for abolition, in decolonization and demilitarization struggles, in disability justice and reproductive justice work, in the claims that domestic workers, sex workers, and labor rights activists make every day, in environmental justice struggles, and the myriad ways that our fight for radical transformation come together. To be in relationship and in solidarity with each other, we have to attend to how power differentially operates within movement building. This is difficult, uncomfortable, and messy work. The bonds that are created are often precarious, but they're also precious. We don't wish to erase our complicated histories, as they have catapulted us into this present moment and confirmed our commitments to dismantling the systems of power that have forced us into the scarcity mindset and fighting each other for scraps. So here are some big questions. What are the radical possibilities of catalyzing cross-racial feminist solidarities and imaginations? What revolutions do we have to create within ourselves in order to dismantle our prejudices and silences to create the world that we want to see? In Black and Asian communities, what are we not seeing? Who are we not centering? And as we stand firm on our values and in our feminist praxis, what wisdom from these frameworks should we take with us? And what needs to be added still? How do we multiply these insights to truly get free? How will we be committed to our radical postures and positionalities and yet remain humble and vulnerable to the fact that we don't have all the answers? And how might we fail in the process? So in kind of an effort to get to those big sticky questions, we're asking a few kind of prompts. I have a few prompts for all of you. So one is the first one I raised. What does solidarity mean to you? What does it look like or feel like? And are there moments that vision has changed in the last few years, especially as we turn inward, as in some ways, I think there's been a retrenchment, at least in my life, around family, community to be smaller and in some ways bigger as we even can think across continents on Zoom like this. I think there's both possibility and retraction. And there are observations that we want to share about the kind of uneven dynamics that we all deal with. So those are my first two opening questions, but I can ask one more kind of more specific prompt. And I'm a history teacher by training. That's what I do in my day-to-day life. So I do have a habit of calling on people that I will not exercise in this space. But what are some moments of principal disagreement that you may have had with different approaches to this problem? So I kind of invite us to share some moments of conflict that we have resolved without rupture, but rather conflict that has allowed us to strengthen. And what are some ways that we can better make space for each other and show up in terms of pleasure and movement building is my final question. So I energetically do not know how to facilitate this space, but I'm excited. Like, please weigh in whenever, if you feel so moved on either side of the Zoom screen.
We're gonna throw it to New York to get us started.
I can share one thing about how it feels like to receive solidarity, because it hasn't happened much. I'm based in France. I'm French, and I'm also an Arab in France. And although I have a very white passing, it still feels like I'm part of a very marginalized community. And we keep on having, as all of you know, a lot of attacks against critical race theory in France. It keeps on happening. I don't remember exactly which incident it was, but I remember reading a letter. It was something about curriculum in university and a very, very direct attack from the government on teachers in university using intersectional frameworks or anything. And I remember receiving a letter from feminists in the US saying, we'll be there for you, like French feminists struggling with those issues. There will be space in our universities for you to discuss those questions. We'll be, and I remember reading that letter and feeling like, oh my God, that's like very powerful. And it was a very simple solidarity statement. Like, we've read so many of them, no? And probably written so many of them as well. But like reading it, I felt like, no, there's like an escape to that. Like there is actually someone cares, like somewhere, and I didn't know. And that's it.
Thank you for sharing.
I can share a little bit about the question about constructive conflict. Not because I have an answer to it, but because I am trying to find an answer to it, and
That's the best.
still struggling with it a little bit. I guess like my personal experience with that is, as you may or may not know, like we've had until January of this year in Brazil, which is my country, a government that was very much oppressive and conservative and right wing and let's say fascist. Say it. That's my view on it. I'm very much against that government and voted for that president to. But I have people who are very close to me, family members who don't think the same way and who don't experience politics in the same way, who don't, who just have a very different view than I do. And for me, that's a very difficult space to be in because we have to navigate very close personal relationships at the same time that we're debating different ethics, really, and different values and different ways of interacting with the world and with other people. So I would love to have an answer for that question. How do you navigate conflict without rupture? I'm trying to find that answer. I still don't have it because I think it's still like very challenging to have conflict that's based on such like gut-wrenching, like value-based beliefs, and still find ways to keep close personal relationships.
And I wonder now if we could tap into Nairobi, because I'm interested in your thoughts, especially as Africans and Kenyans. We are often the targets of white savior complexes wrapped up as solidarity. Colonial dynamics get reproduced even in civil society spaces. And so I wondered, what does solidarity mean to you based on all the things you have seen and experienced?
Say something. Yeah. I think I will go off of the question you asked about who are we centering or who are we not centering? And I think the reason I'm picking that point, for example, is because I think recently some of the conversations that I've been having and the most frustrating thing about them is, and then to tap into the conflict part and without rupturing. And I continuously ask myself, when is rupturing a wrong thing? Because I don't think to rupture is a wrong thing. To harm people in the process is a wrong thing. But to erupt because of the feelings you're feeling and the emotions, and to channel anger because of not wanting to accept the abuse and the violence that is meted on you, and by virtue of being born as women or in feminine bodies, even more, it's okay for you to have that anger. And so again, to start from who are we not centering, the whole conversation of who are we not centering is another conversation that we can have many perspectives to look at it. But my perspective that I've been struggling with at the moment is, are we even centering ourselves as women? And the reason I've asked myself that question so many times is, for example, we really fight to be part of already existent systems. For example, let's look at leadership. We always say we want more women to ascend into positions of leadership. But my question has always been, with the systems that are already in place, is that the place we want women to go and lead? Because we already know these systems are founded on violence and abuse, and the way they're structured, everything about it speaks of violence and abuse. And I know we most of the time say the more the women will have there, then they will help change things. But also I'm a Kenyan who in 2010, I was really young, I had just cleared high school. And in 2010, we were all sold the idea that the constitution that was not necessarily what we wanted, at least not to its entirety, is something that we needed to accept in that moment. And then as time goes by, we will look at things that didn't speak life to the existence of different people, especially the marginalized group, and then we'll try and change that. But as soon as we agreed to that constitution, a lot of violence has continued to be meted, and they've used those loopholes to continue to met more violence. And that's why we are here today, that we have a constitution, for example, and we were on the panel the day before yesterday, I think, and we were having a discussion about the fact that we have a constitution that is seen to be one of the most progressive constitutions in Africa. Africa. But this same constitution has huge loopholes that is allowing for Kenyan members of the LGBTIQ community to be killed, and for people to justify why it was okay for them to be killed, for people to justify why our bodies would be found in such disturbing situations, and people to agree with that. For a Supreme Court to come up with a judgment, and a fucking president that we voted for not even 10 months ago coming out to butcher to lose in translation the meaning of the judgment just so he can make more violence on this group of people that has become ever so easy to let go of and to manipulate and to, you know, to discriminate against, but also to betray and, you know, to use when convenient, and to leave them alone when you feel like whatever it is they're fighting is something you constantly don't want to agree with. And so my question is, even as I'm fighting, as a person who is a human rights activist and a feminist, and I'm fighting for a space that I can be myself as a woman, as a queer person, as a non-binary person, with all the identities and entities that I come with as a human being, am I fighting to do that in a space that is already violent, or what is the alternative? And what does centering myself and the people who are like me look like? Because certainly it doesn't look like continuously having to ask people who are definitely my abusers to create a space for me. What? To sit in the table of abuse with them? I fucking don't want that. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. I think that's kind of the reframe at the heart of what we are talking about, of what does it feel like, right? I don't think solidarity feels accommodationist sometimes. It doesn't feel, I don't know, there's things about compromise that don't always feel resonant with solidarity. I think solidarity and compromise are different things sometimes. Yeah. For me recently, it felt like, and this is a little bit of a less intellectual answer, but food always feels like solidarity when there's like food at a gathering or at a meeting. No shade to this meeting at all.
We have food in Nairobi.
But I was just thinking, at AAFC, we've tried to say that any event we have will have food, just so whoever shows up, whatever your reality is, there's some acknowledgement that you might be hungry and you might have been working all day, or you might have whatever, to show up and have this conversation that you are participating, but we're going to feed you. And that has been something that has required some, you know, shifting of priorities for us, moving things around, not doing something if we can't actually show up in that way. But I think it makes things a lot more comfortable, and it's often not professional. You know, we sometimes struggle with like the spaces we're in. And then the other thing I will say that really felt like solidarity to me, I'm a queer person. I'm in a history department at a very like buttoned up institution. And often the thing you cannot talk about is sexuality. I'm a historian of sexuality too. So I write about HIV/AIDS, I write about sex workers, I write about other kinds of movement building, and occasionally in department spaces, when someone is willing to talk out loud, even if they might not feel entirely comfortable, it feels like someone extending a hand to me to say, this is acceptable to bring into this space and not shameful, which it's such a small thing, but that really does feel like solidarity for a medievalist to say, I think that's really interesting that you're talking about condom use. It's like amazing to me. I love that.
And what not?
For me, solidarity feels like, and we were having this conversation with Mary Liz earlier about mutual aid, for example, not having to jump through hoops to access that which is very, very basic. Solidarity for me means community, it means feminist care, it means also boundaries, because that can be lost in translation. So I feel like mutual aid, community, feminist care, self-care even, without attaching it to capitalism or consumerism, that feels like rich to me, not having to jump through hoops to access basic needs like food, like you said. I agree with you. That is solidarity to me. And also Sanyu's point of not having to attach ourselves to the savior complex, but then being in the global south.
Global South.
Global south. Yeah. Coming from a global south, I was trying to find the political correct one. Global south, and having to have to depend so much for very many centuries on Western aid. It feels very like we are relinquishing our powers when we accept some form of support from the West. But it shouldn't be so, because once you maybe attach the aspect of local ownership of that support, participating in the processes of making that kind of support very in line or aligned to the circumstances on the ground, then I think we can find a balance without us relinquishing our powers to align to the objectives and goals of the source of the funds.
Or even in terms of language, what does it mean to maybe call aid reparations, right? Those are different things with different kinds of values attached to them.
Yeah.
New Yorkers.
I was just gonna say, I think
That one. Go for it. It's the pleasure of it. It's radic.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, it's not as okay, so this moment feels like solidarity in terms of justice portal, because the thing is, if this had become applying for a visa and going to an airport, I would have refused, because also, like, I don't know how to explain this. Like, I've already seen, like, in some events for CSW already, people from certain countries, people from the global south cannot go to events that are being held for all of us, for all women all over the world, in Canada and all these places. It is the most humiliating, most traumatic thing to go through those processes. And it's just, I think the thing like when that happens, when you see on Twitter something happens, when it happens to you, I think the thing that maybe it struggles with is how much in God, no. Okay.
I can
yeah,
I can help you with that, because this is a conversation we left pending with Michelle the other day. We couldn't even finish, but I think it's very, very interesting because I was part of CSW in 2019, and it's funny how one of the things that has constantly occurred to me is the question of, first of all, in most of African countries, and I'm only going to speak about African countries because I know most of these issues kind of replicate themselves in Africa. And for example, the process of looking for a visa to the US in Kenya will cost you roughly around 23,000 Kenya shillings, right? That is only for service, and if your visa is, if it goes through, then for the processing of it. But the around 16 to 18,000 Kenya shillings that you pay is money that will not come back to you in case you don't get a visa. That's one. That, in comparison with the fact that an American or a person who holds an American visa will just pack their backpack, probably not even pack anything else, maybe just like things that are necessities, and book a flight and jet into the country, and they will pay $50 to get a visa. Instantly, their visa will be processed at the airport, at the immigration office instantly, and they will be able to go about their business in this country. And then I constantly kept on asking myself, and this conversation was born off of the fact that while I was at the CSW, I met this lady who, her point of conviction was the fact that she's been in the CSW, she's been coming to the CSW for the last 15 years. There's no year she has missed CSW. And my conflict was, you've been coming to CSW for 15 years. You've not missed a year. And this has been okay with you? Because for me to get that, for me to get that visa, actually up to the point where I got the visa, it was also shocking to me as a process, because the reason I ended up having to get a visa is because there's young mothers, there's young women who are supposed to go for I'm not saying I'm not a young woman, but I'm just saying there were people who are much more of a priority to come for CSW. But the reason they couldn't come is because they applied for a visa in time, they went through the process and all that, and they were still denied visas. Young mothers especially, and the reason they were denied is because somehow America and its ambassador and everyone, by the way, felt like they have the moral authority to say, we think you're young mothers, if you go to America, you will not come back, and we don't want that. And so we are gonna deny you visas and all that kind of stuff. And I think that thing has pissed me off until today. And while my visa expires next year, so you'll better find a way to bring me to the US before this thing expires. But that's besides the point, not for CSW, definitely. But that's besides the point. I kept on thinking about this whole thing. And for me, it's not like I don't like enjoying when things work for me, but I like asking myself. I had many privileges. I don't have a child. So that's a privilege in that sense. And I feel like it shouldn't be a privilege. Someone is saying they're coming for something very important. Why don't you just give them the visa? If they don't come back, then you will deal with it, you'll cross the bridge when you get there, but you can't assume this person has nothing important to do in this country of theirs. And I remember when I went for my visa appointment, I met this bald white man, and he was seated there and he was wearing this serious face. And I remember three people before me, two of them were Somalis, and then one of them was a student who came with the mother to try and get a student visa. And both of them were denied visas so loudly. I was hearing there, and I was confident before, but when I had these three people get denied visas, I was like, I'm also going to go through the process. But I remember when I got to that guy and he was wearing this serious face. And I remember I told him, life is too short, man. I don't know why you're angry or mad because you've been yelling at these people, but just smile. Like literally, even if you're going to deny me visa, smile about it. It's okay. And then when I told him that, I don't know what happened, but I think I kind of disarmed him. So he looked at my document and then he asked me a question. He asked me, you're going to the US, what's your agenda there? And then I told him, I just have a week to go for CSW and then come back. And then he asked me, what if you don't come back? And I remember I just told him, well, sir, I'm sorry to say, but I'm a Kenyan born and raised. I feel like even as an activist and as a feminist, and I know there are many spaces I can be a feminist and an activist in America, but my role as an activist and a feminist is only here in this country. And trust me, the country is still in shambles. So that's the reason I will come back. Because I still want to fight. I got work to do. And sadly, for you and I, me staying in your country will look like I am done with my work and I'm not yet done in my country. So I'll come back because of that. And he laughed and he didn't even ask me any questions. He just told me, go and pay for your processing, your visa is accepted. Right? And that thing has made me feel not necessarily guilty, but very conflicted, because I kept on thinking, a student who is traveling to the US to study, probably they're not even going on scholarship. They just want the visa because they've found someone who is funding the education and they want to go and study, denied a visa. Two Somalis, who one, by the way, was taken to a chamber to talk to them because definitely profiling and everything we know about profiling Muslims and Somali people and all that kind of stuff. So that, and then me who comes and goes through this process, and because I managed to disarm this person, maybe, just maybe, who knows, that is the reason. And I asked myself, is this what a process should look like? And then I asked myself again, should then CSW continue happening in a country that makes many people go through these processes, yet it can happen? UN has headquarters in Kenya, UN has headquarters in Ethiopia, UN has headquarters in many different places. This meeting can be held in so many different other places conveniently. And those people from those countries that enjoy a lot of privilege and passport power can come to these countries, but people will constantly choose to bring people to the US, which is very discriminating, marginalizing, but also intentionally leaving people out of these conversations that should otherwise be part of this conversation. And I am grateful we can participate like this, but isn't coming coming face to face with these people to have conversations with them about these issues supposed to contribute something. Hence why there's a whole conference that is centered on that for 2 weeks, speaking about these issues. And why shouldn't people from the global south then get to enjoy that freedom of movement to access these places, because these places remain important, if not for anything, for collecting reparations. Thank you.
Yes. And then who are we centering?
Yeah.
Also, who are we centering if
Yes.
all these things are being held there?
There.
When it is convenient for somebody with an American, British, Japanese passport.
And the rest of us.
Yeah.
And if you may, without, okay, probably maybe not. Sometimes I like offending people because it's good when you offend people. They'll not forget you, and then they'll not forget to do the right thing. So why is it that it's okay to bring these places? If you are looking, for example, at racism and colorism, the biggest perpetrators are the same people we are fighting to bring this meeting to, and then we go there and have different experiences that would profile us as people. Because I remember when I was in New York, one of the things, that was the first time I had a real life experience with colorism, and just having a black couple literally treat me like, bitch, your accent is not American, so fuck off, stay away from us, we're scared of you. And that was really, really scary to experience. And I'm like, I flew 14 hours to come experience this, when these people would have come into my country and immediately they land in Kenya. Everyone literally comes close to worshiping them because they hear the accent and they're like, respect these people, they're powerful people and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, what's the reason? In Cardi B's voice, what was the reason?
When we're talking about CSW, so right now it's around almost 9 our time. For you, it's daytime. And I know there are other processes and other side events going on. If you are at work from 8:30 or 9, and then all that time you come from work and then you attend virtually CSW, what time will you have for rest?
Yes.
When, I think for how many, this is the 67th one.
67th.
It's still in New York. When will we move from 67 times? I'm sure many of the people who came there for the first time, the first CSW, are dead.
Yes,
most of them.
Absolutely.
But for all that while, we've been going there. Why don't we also have like a CSW? Not like now, I know Femnet has CSW for Africa, but like the global CSW, but in Africa.
Yes.
For them to also come and experience the things we also experience while there. Because it's getting late.
It's becoming too much. Now we all had to come to America to talk about climate change, only for Trump to trample over all the, like, it doesn't make sense. We can go to countries that actually
shambles here too. It shambles here too.
Exactly. And that's the thing. And that's the thing. When it comes to the carbon, to the carbon footprint, we know how America contributes hugely to it. And I'm like, if it's the year of CSW where we are talking about climate change, why don't we take the CSW to a country that is actually more abiding to climate change contribution, so that we can learn the things that are being done in that country and all that kind of, instead of coming to a country that is, I don't get it. I don't get it.
Yeah, I think that it's because it doesn't make sense. But there's something interesting that you're all making me think of in terms of pleasure, which I do think maybe the conference experience, I've never been to CSW, I'm not going now, but I mean, no, I said I'm a historian, activist, whatever, but I do think that this might be one of the least pleasurable places for people to gather, because it's expensive.
Very expensive.
No one has any time, you know. In all of the New Yorkers here, I think I'm the only one who lives in New York, because we're all too busy working all the time. And I will go from this to my other job, which is from 5 to 9. You know, there's just so much work. There is no time for pleasure. And so I do think that in some ways having it here it makes the conversation perhaps about power and capital and who has that, rather than what the experience together is like in ways that are pleasurable. Because it looks like you're all having a really good time from over here, over there. You know, it seems more fun.
We have, we are, and the only thing is we do have to wrap up soon. And I wanted to check in if you on your side had any closing thoughts, and if us on this side we had any closing thoughts. It always feels so, I hate to interrupt a juicy conversation. But just to give y'all a chance to leave us with something, and we'll do the same.
Well, I'll open it up to all of you too, but I just want to say thank you for spending your time, your evening time with me. I really am convinced that the only way forward is together, and to make space to at least hear what's happening. We can be in our, together across distance. So thank you. I really appreciate these hours that we've had together.
And if I may, like, one thing, like, we started the week with a big political conversation about access and how this whole container situation that we're doing to address those questions, visa question, time zone justice questions, all of that is here. That's the reason why we're here. So I'm really glad that we're having this conversation also as the closing session for this week. And also maybe to tell you that I don't know what's the conversation inside the UN, because I've been very few. I've been in this container for a long time, but like the conversation within the civil society people who are in New York is really about accessibility. Everybody's talking about their friend who didn't get a visa, like the cost, the conversation here is about that. So.
If I can jump in with just a few things to add to that, I think it's about those questions of access and so on, but I think it's also about us fundamentally questioning who is the UN for? It's definitely not for people. I mean, I think we need to recognize that the UN is a thing that was built by states and it continues to serve states, and that we really are rights holders, even if you want to use that disgusting language, are peripheral to the system, right? What's actually being traded here is about power and capital. So, like, I think when we understand that that's actually what's at play here, then perhaps we begin to question why do we continue to come into the system? What is it that we are expecting from the system that we are so peripheral to? And is this not the moment to start challenging whether it isn't time for us to have a new system? Right, something completely different. Because even if you want to have conversations with global South states, you will hear them say the same thing, that they're also being bullied and intimidated by global North states. Like, and I mean, this is all relative, right? But even global South states are struggling under the boot of America and under the boot of Western Europe. So, I think the whole system needs to go. It's not working anymore, right? It's not working. And it's time to build a different system, one that really is about people and people's power. And that's where solidarity works. So, yeah.
So hi everyone, I've been listening from the back. There's a few of us at the back. And I was part of the Young Advocates portal earlier on. And every time I keep listening to these conversations, I think of an analogy of someone opening a door for you, right? There's two ways that people can open doors for you. I can open the door for you and let you pass. So if you open the door for me and I pass, I decide where in the house or wherever I'm going to go, I'm going to sit. But you can open the door for me and then lead me. So that's the question that lingers for me when we're talking about solidarity. What is solidarity? If you're opening the door or giving me access, but then still leading me, then I'm only going to the places that you want me to go to. And so that's the masked solidarity. Oh, we're together in this, but only as far as I want you to go, right? But true solidarity for me is this is what I want, this is where I'm going to go. So if you're going to be in solidarity and you're in positions of power, give me access to that power and let me fight for my rights. Yeah.
And now doors being opened for me will never be the same again.
Yeah, and okay. So for me, just listening to all the conversations that I really resonate with, I feel my understanding on, feminist solidarity is that it keeps into account like so many perspectives that I really appreciate that feminist solidarity does, look at solidarity in so many ways, from access to resources, to how individuals feel in spaces and how they engage in those spaces. But also I feel that power imbalance really affects so much our global feminist solidarity, how we access those spaces to represent ourselves, especially African women being able to participate in conferences where we should be a part of, and why those spaces are not even accessible in Nairobi, Ethiopia, and especially, and even at the rural spaces, because in big conferences, we hear about, resources to grassroots organizations. We hear about, having conversations at the grassroots, but then why are those spaces not providing ways in which people are actually able to access those spaces in a more easy and effective way, that we don't have to continue struggling and we don't have to continue pushing in ways that people feel that we are complaining, and I feel that complaining is really good at times. So, I really appreciate feminist spaces in the first place, because we look at things differently in so many perspectives to ensure that we speak about each and every woman's needs, including, gender and non-conforming, LGBTQ women with disability. Like, we really try as much as we can to be as inclusive as we can in terms of addressing or speaking about women's issues. So I'm so happy to be in this space, and thank you so much.
And that is a beautiful note to wrap up. It's been such a pleasure being in conversation with you in Nairobi and with folks in New York and those who are tuning in. This is what solidarity looks like. Thank you for choosing to be part of this alternative feminist space where we are choosing the terms in which we can have these discussions, being deliberate about how we are building relationship and community with each other. The musicians earlier couldn't be here, but also want to just thank them. Ivy Alexander, Lisa Dornoa, follow them on streaming platforms everywhere. And this is the final session as part of like AWID's portals. And so shout out to all the folks who were able to make this possible. There were all the elves behind the scenes. And so we see you, we thank you, and we keep doing the work of being in community together and showing up in meaningful solidarity. So good night, beautiful people. We are off to party in Nairobi.
Thank you.
Bye, have fun.
Bye,
Thank you, Sanya, for holding the space. Bye.
Bye.
It was so nice meeting you.
It was nice meeting you. No, really, there has to be a party though. What's going on? What's going on?
What are party people? Let's check in with the party people. Okay? Tomorrow is still Friday. Rest.
Oh, Sherry, can we mute something? Okay, she's coming.
Oh, It's like they're walking out into a snowstorm or something.
Yeah.
Mom!